she said, "Hey girls, like I spoke with your mum and she said that you can come over mine. Why are we here? Like what's going on? Are we going anywhere?" I just remember saying, "You're not going home. You are not going home." And I was like, "I want my mum." And she was like, "Shh, sit down. Stop asking me questions." Like she just kept telling us off. And I started getting upset and I said, I want to go home. And she was like, "You're not going home." She was just sort of opening the blinds and like doing this and looking out and kind of like she was waiting for somebody, but I pulled out like a butter knife. I could have been killed, raped, I could have been tortured, moved to another country,
Yeah.
hidden in her. I could have been kept in her flat for God knows how long, and maybe nobody ever saw me.
A few weeks ago on my community post, I put a post out saying that I wanted to collab with another channel. And then you sent me an email. We were talking about what we could do.
Yeah.
And we were throwing a few ideas around and stuff like that. I remember you mentioned in passing something quite serious, actually, but it was in passing. And you said that you were abducted
Yeah.
as a child. And as soon as I saw that, I was thinking, like, hold on a minute. Like, there is the video. Getting your story is something that I want to get out and get across. And it's fitting after the Madeleine McCann John Wedger interview. Whether you
Yeah.
believe she was abducted or not, that's besides the point, but it's quite fitting that I'm going to talk to you about your story. I don't know anything about it. I've not got a clue, which is kind of like that. A lot of the times when I've done stuff, I kind of know a little bit, but I don't know anything. And then later on, I want us to talk about your channel. So you've got a channel called Missing Mysteries. Right, okay, so we're going to talk about your channel later. Missing Mysteries will that means quite a lot to me as well because of work I've done before. Mall's murders, missing people in the Mall's murders, Nicola Bully, some big work on this channel. Again, Maddie McCann's just been a video, so missing seems to be the order of the day, really. And then we'll get into what's led you to your channel, Missing Mysteries. Talk about it. We'll put a link down in the description, and we'll see how you got there. So, firstly, when you told me that you were abducted, like that was quite shocking. Just take me back to the beginning. Tell me how old are you and what happened, and tell me your story.
So it was back in 1995, and I was 7 years old, and my neighbour next door. So we lived in a street with terraced housing, and years ago, neighbours, we'd all like look out for each other. Everyone was friends. We used to have like street parties and stuff. And my neighbour next door, she was like a year and a half younger than me, so she would have been about 5.5. Her name was Hayley, and we were like really close friends. We were basically like best buddies. And we would just hang out in each other's gardens. And her mother was friendly with a woman called Caroline, and she was a sex worker, which I didn't know when I was a child. But she was quite friendly with my friend's mum. Her name was Linda. So this one particular day, I was out in the front little garden with Hayley. We were sort of playing around with like our hair or something, and this Caroline lady had just sort of walked up to us, and the way I describe her is she had like long frizzy like red hair. Well, it was like ginger. I don't know if it's politically correct to say that these days. I'm not sure, but she had like long frizzy ginger hair, like really bright red lipstick. Like if you looked at her now, you'd be like, "Whoa, that's a lot." But she wore like a tight sort of like a short skirt that was leather, and she had like fishnet stocking type things on. She had like long boots, and anybody looking at her judging would say she looks like a typical sex worker. I know years ago they'd call them prostitutes, but I don't like that word, and it's not very nice. But anyway, she came over, and obviously because we knew she was friends with Hayley's mum, we were like, "Oh, hi, Caroline," like kind of innocent to it. And she said something on the lines of like, "Hey, girls, like I spoke with your mum, and she said that you can come over mine. So me and Hayley were like, oh, like really excited because I wasn't allowed to leave the street when I was a kid. Like my parents were really strict on it. But because she'd sold her that it was trusted that she could take us, I kind of was just like, oh, okay. You know, she was someone we knew. We kind of trusted her. Um, so I remember her saying, "Oh, come on, let's go." And she took my hand on her one hand, and then Hayley on the other, and she just sort of walked away with us. And when you're a kid, everything seems like 1,000 times bigger. So I remember like approaching the end of the street and be like, "Oh my God, like there's like this unknown world." And I was excited, but I was nervous. I wasn't really sure what was going on. And I just remember walking, like we walked for a while. It's probably like 10, 15 minutes, which was a lot for me. Well, it's a lot now, really, and let's be honest. Because I'm so lazy. But yeah, so we were walking and, you know, sort of skipping along, quite happy and merrily, like completely innocent. And I remember then we got to some sort of apartment block and it seemed quite dreary. There was like, it was like dark red walls and there was this sort of like porch area where you sort of go in and you're under this cover. And we just went into this property. So it was a ground floor flat that I'd learned later on, but I was a bit dumb as a child. Like I was a bit clueless, so I didn't think anything of that.
Is this like a
Um,
tower block?
I think it was like a one up, one down. So I think it was a small block, but the way that
Yeah.
they built it was like, you know, like these sort of roofs you get over doors sometimes. So you kind of like go underneath,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like a maisonette type thing, I think. Um, but I didn't think anything of it because obviously she was Caroline. There was this woman who we knew. So um, we went inside and I remember really vividly she had these like vertical pink blinds, like almost as pink as my nail.
Yeah.
Just really gross, but like typical, like probably 90s decor type things. But they were all shut, like all her blinds and all her windows were shut. And I thought it was a bit bizarre because it was sort of like the middle of the day. I'm pretty sure it was just like a Saturday or a Sunday. It would have been a weekend. And instantly thought, oh, this is a bit weird. It's a bit dark in here. Like, what's going on? So I remember saying something like what I remember the words are not specific, okay? Because obviously I was quite young and this is a long time ago. But it was
Yeah.
something on the lines of like, why are we here? Like, what's going on? Are we going anywhere? And instantly Caroline was like, no, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here. So I was a bit like, okay, like I felt like she told me off. Um, and then I kind of remember looking at Hayley and being like, oh, I don't know. Then we just sort of sat on the sofa and we were sort of kicking our legs and like twiddling our thumbs. And I remember the TV show, like one of those, you know, back in the day, that massive TVs.
Yeah, where
They're
they're like
like,
what
they went on
as
for like
wide,
5 years on the back.
they're like as they're like as deep as they are wide, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
And like, I remember saying, can we turn the TV on? And she was like, no, you're not turning the TV on. You're not doing anything. You sit there and you be quiet. So again, I was like quite upset and a bit shocked because she'd never spoken to us like that before. And then I remember her, she was pacing across her flat and it was like open plan. So she had the kitchen and the living space. So we were sitting on the sofa in the living space and she just kept pacing back and forth between the windows. And the front of her flat was on a street that was like a dead end, and the other side was like a main road. But they had like bollards type thing, and it was like I think it was like a one-way system or something. So you would have like traffic and people passing and stuff because it was near quite a busy area. And she was just sort of opening the blinds and like doing this and looking out and kind of like she was waiting for somebody. And I didn't click straight away. I was just like, you know, being a kid, curious, like is it a bit
Mm.
odd or whatever, or maybe I at that point I was like, I don't know what she's looking for.
Was you scared at this point? Because when you said that when you went into the flat or whatever,
Hmm.
her her tone kind of changed with you when she said that you're not leaving. Did you feel scared then?
Yeah, I think it was more like shock first because she'd never spoken to us like that before. And I thought, well, if she's like my mum's friend or Linda's friend or Haley's friend, like, why is she being mean? Because I always saw her, even though she was kind of a scatty woman, I always saw her as quite friendly and down to earth. So I was, like when a teacher tells you off and you're like, oh, I kind of felt like that. I was like,
Yeah,
why is she? But at that point, I don't know if I was scared. I think I was more shocked and a bit nervous, I guess.
yeah.
But as she sort of carried on pacing, and she was just all she was doing was just looking out the window like she was waiting for somebody. And the one particular window that she kept looking out of was the side where there was like a dead end on a street. So in my head, then I clicked and I thought, I wonder if she's waiting for somebody. She must be waiting. And I think I said something like, are you expecting someone? Because that was probably a big word for a 7-year-old, but it was kind of like, oh, is somebody coming? Like, and I probably got a bit excited about that. And Hayley was just looking at me all the time. She didn't really say much. And she was like, shh, sit down, stop asking me questions. Like, she just kept telling us off. And I think then we probably been there like a good maybe 45 minutes or something, maybe close to an hour. And I started getting upset and I said, I want to go home. And she was like, you're not going home. So at that point, then I was like, I started crying. I was like kicking things. I was like, I want to go home. Let me go home. And I started screaming. And she was like, shut up, stop screaming. You're not going home. And I just remember looking at Hayley. Hayley just turned white. And at that point, then that's when I started to like, excuse my French, but I shit myself. You might have to bleep that out.
No,
Um,
you can swear on here. That's absolutely fine.
oh,
Real stories. Like, yeah, go for it.
yeah. So yeah, I basically shit myself at that point. So the nerves kicked in. I started shaking. I was crying. I was screaming. She kept saying, stop screaming. And at one point, because I started screaming, Hayley started screaming. And she went over and she put her hand over Hayley's mouth and she was like, stop screaming. And I thought, well, if she's doing that, she's going to do it to me. And then
Yeah.
something must have clicked in my head because I thought, maybe I need to be smart here. Like she said, I'm not going home. And I was in my head, I was like, I am going home. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. Um, and she was still pacing. And I remember like those locks you have on your door that's on like a chain.
Yeah.
She had
Where you
she
can
had
just
one of
open
those.
the door a little bit.
Yeah. So she'd put that on. I forgot to say that at the beginning, but she'd put that on when we went in there. And at that point, I didn't even click.
Mm.
But I kind of was looking around and I was thinking, what can I do here? And I thought, well, she's angry. She keeps looking out the window. Then she said, I'm not going home. And I didn't know what that meant as a kid, other than I wasn't going home. So I obviously was like traumatized and stuff. And I just remember screaming, saying, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. And sort of throwing my hands and stuff. And she was like, you're not going home. I just remember saying, you're not going home. You are not going home. And I was like, I want my mum. And she was like, you're not going home. And then probably a few minutes later, I was sitting on the sofa again and I looked at Hayley and I was like, something on the lines of like, we're going home. Like, we got to get home. We got to figure out a way home. And then I remember going to a kitchen drawer, and it sounds really cheesy and pathetic, but I pulled up like a butter knife because in my head I thought if I guess something essentially a weapon, which sounds really bad for a 7-year-old, but my dad let me watch a poltergeist at the age of 7, so let's be fair.
I think you've got every right to go and try and find a weapon if some crazy woman has got you locked in a flat. So
Yeah.
don't worry about any judgment on you going trying to find something to defend yourself, butter
Yeah.
knife or not.
Well, it's
So
like,
go on,
would it do damage? And it's like, not as much as a proper kitchen knife, but then it could do because it's still a knife, isn't it? It's still got sharp edge to an extent. But I
yeah,
wasn't thinking that critically at that age. But
yeah.
um, it was just like, what can I do to try and scare this Caroline woman? And I remember pulling it out of the drawer and just standing there, sort of like big, even though I was only 7, I was tiny. And I was like, we're going home. And she was like, you're not going home. I was like, you are. Yeah. I remember screaming, going, you're letting me go home. And I was holding the knife out in front of me. I remember holding out, going, we're going home. And probably something like, I'll hurt you or whatever. Like, I'll get you. And then something happened. I can't remember what it was. I think we tried to come up with some sort of distraction where she was at the window on the other side of the room. And I whispered to Hayley, like, I'm going to lift you up. And then I want you to move the chain thing on the
Ah,
door. So I grabbed her and I lifted her up. and she undid it, and Caroline come charging over, and we just opened the door, and I just went, run, and we just ran, and we ran all, I don't know how we got home, but we just ran and ran and ran. I tried to remember what buildings looked like, if there was any particular cars or any features that, you know, were in my mind as we were walking there. But it was hard because we were so happy and innocent going there.
Yeah.
We weren't under duress, you know, we weren't being forced at that point. Like we were, you know, we were innocent. So I just remember running and running is probably the fastest I've ever run in my life. I was holding her hand and we just ran and she was screaming. We were both like blubbing, crying. And we managed to get back to our street. I don't know how we just did. And then is this part is what is difficult is when Haley went into her house, and she obviously like told her mum and whatever happened. But when I went home, my mum was lounging on the sofa. She was like half asleep, and I was crying, and she was like, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I was like, I think I was abducted or something like that. You know, I was taken, and she just said, "Stop being silly." Like she actually thought I was
Oh,
joking.
didn't take you seriously then.
No, not at all. And
Wow.
like to this day, I brought it up with my mum, and she was like, "I didn't say that. I wouldn't have said that." And I was like, "No, mum, you did. Like you didn't take me seriously at all." And I was taken against my will, unwillingly. I don't know what this Caroline woman was doing, but as an adult reflecting back, I think that she was possibly going to pass us over to maybe child sex traffickers, or maybe she was going to sell us on, or maybe something dodgy on those lines was going to
You know.
happen. And that like is even though it was brief, it was traumatic. It like has affected me my whole life, because I've never been able to trust people properly because of it. Because if someone comes and you think they're a friend, and then they're taking you, and then they're forcing you to feel unusual and unhappy and frightened and scared, that's not normal behavior from someone you trust, is it? So
Not at
um
all.
it's just a harrowing experience. It was horrible. But I'm lucky, I'm really lucky to be able to share my story, because who knows what could have happened. And Cardiff being the way it was years ago, you know, you had the docks, and there was a heavy industry there with people travelling back and forth and stuff through South Wales on the M4.
I want to go back to something that you said when you got your butter knife out,
Yeah.
which I think for a 7-year-old that's like, but okay, it wouldn't have done a lot of damage unless it was for a piece of toast. But um, in the moment, as a 7-year-old, I think that's quite a savvy, smart move. You've obviously, well, I don't know much anything about you, but it sounds like you've been brought up well to even get to the point where you can have that kind of thinking. Now, when you wave that knife around, what did she do? How did she react to that?
She sort of stood back, and I remember her putting her hands up, which is kind of like a no defense type strategy, which is what I was taught anyway in self defense, is you make yourself look like you're not going to try anything. But
Yeah,
I remember her shouting at me and saying like things like, "Stop being silly, like put the knife down, and you're not going to do anything with that." But I think from what I remember, because it was in front of me and I was sort of charging, you know, I don't know if I would have done damage. I think it was more like the thought that I could have potentially done it. But I remember her being like this. So it wasn't like she tried to grab it off me or anything. She just sort of stood there and took it, which you know,
do you know if she tried to come after you when you left the house? Did you even look back?
I didn't look. I wouldn't have known. I was so petrified. And the thing is, right, she wore these horrible boot things with like weird stiletto style ends on them. I don't know, the actual heel.
Yeah.
And I like I don't know if she would have ran after us in them or not. I don't know. But I didn't look back. I didn't, because I thought, I just remember running, just grab Haley's hand and just ran.
Someone that immediately comes to mind when you tell me when you tell me what you just told me is, I don't know how much of the Moors murders you actually know about, but Leslie Ann Downey, who was only, I think
She's like
I think she was,
7 or 8.
no, she's a little bit older. I think she was 9 or 10. She was took from a like a fair on Boxing Day by Myra Hindley. She was just took off. Like, she was kind of, innocent. Well, she was innocent, but she was kind of vulnerable to danger, like you are kind of at that age, and especially to a woman as well. This is why a big part of what I spoke to Terry Kilbride, who John Kilbride was the second victim. What me and his brother spoke about on and off camera was that a lot of kids then, back in the 60s, even up till like some even now may even go off with a woman, because you have that trust in a woman that we all believe that they should have that innate maternal instinct. And she was took by hand, and she was took back to a home, and unspeakable things happened. She was recorded, basically being kind of tortured. Disgusting pictures were took, and she didn't make it out of that house alive. And it does sound like possibly there were people coming. So very, very lucky escape. You might never have been able to tell this kind of story. So do you think about what could have happened? Does that stick with you? What could have happened to this day?
Yeah, I do. Like, as an adult, I do, because my background's youth work and learning about like adverse childhood experiences and trauma and things like that.
Mm.
You learn and you realize, like risks and things and potential risks. And obviously, like, as a kid, I was like really happy go lucky and outgoing and bouncy, and like, everything was fairies and unicorns and stuff. I couldn't see wrong in people. But
Yeah,
looking back, like reflecting, it is something that it traumatized me in the sense that now, like, I don't really trust people. But it is, I do think, what could have been the worst possible outcome. And I wasn't really aware of like stranger danger type stuff then, because I was so friendly and because of the way we were brought up. Like, everyone sort of knew each other and respected
mm,
each other, and we'd leave our front doors open. We had kids in and out of our house all the time. So it's weird, like years ago, people weren't as nervous of this sort of stranger danger type stuff. But when I look back, I think, bloody hell, like, yeah, anything could have happened. I could have been killed, raped, I could have been tortured, moved to another country,
yeah.
hidden in there. I could have been kept in a flat for God knows how long, and maybe nobody ever saw me, I've thought that. And then when you see cases like Madeleine McCann or any missing child case is horrendous. Like, just even the thought of like what the parents and loved ones, their families and stuff go through. And that's why I do my Missing Mysteries channel, because I just think I had a lucky escape. I'm a survivor. And it was
Mm.
only brief, but it was still horrifying. Um, and I just think people who do go missing and there aren't any answers, they deserve a chance for their missing loved one to have their story shared. So people might think, oh, yeah, I remember seeing a guy walking, or, I remember this particular thing happening. And obviously these days we've got like ring doorbells and
Mm.
dash cam footage. We never had none of that back in the day. We had nothing, and people were so like friendly and chatty and down to earth. I don't think people would have even remembered, even though she was distinctive looking, this Caroline woman, would anyone have batted an eyelid because it was a woman with two young girls? It's,
Did you ever see her again?
I didn't see her again, no. But I always wonder, did she perhaps realise what she done was such high risk? She must have
Yeah.
been nervous to an extent, stealing two kids, like.
Like, I bet she vanished from the area like a fart in the wind. I don't think she would ever have wanted to show her face around the area where she took you from.
Now, even if I drive down the street, um, it gives me shivers. I think, oh, bloody hell, like it's just a horrible memory. But I don't know if she went back. I feel like she probably would have because she was close friends with Linda. But then that would be a brave thing to do given what she did. And then I didn't really discuss it with Hayley after what happened. I didn't really ask her. I didn't find out if she told her mum. My assumption was she would have.
Mm.
Because she just ran straight in the house and she was crying, but nothing, it wasn't talked about. Like, my mum just sort of brushed it off as I was being silly or I made it up. And when you've got a 7-year-old and, you know, you are quite imaginative at that age, I think my mum probably thought I was being a silly or whatever, is what I think was her words. But um, I don't know. I never saw her again, so who knows? Maybe she got bloody abducted by someone. I don't know. I never.
Did you realise the magnitude of what had happened at the time, or was this more reflection? Did you know
At
it
the
then?
time, I think it sounds like probably strange, but I feel like I brushed it under the carpet because my mum was kind of like, "Oh, stop being silly." In my head, I think I must have thought, "Oh, well, maybe I am being silly," you know, maybe she was playing around or
Mm.
it wasn't as serious as it was. But when I look back, I'm like, "Blood, yeah, it is a near miss, isn't it?" Like I tell people I was abducted, like, "Whoa, my God, you're abducted! Oh my God!" Like they don't kind of believe me, but it is an abduction. I was taken
Yeah, of
without my
course.
parents knowing, you know, against my will, really, as much as I was up for it in the first instance, because she said, "You're allowed to come over my house." So
Mm.
I trusted her. And that's how a lot of things happen these days. A lot of people who, well, I say a lot of, I think majority of cases, people are probably abducted by somebody they know, or there's links to somebody they know.
Normally, as somebody that you know, off as well, I found that with things like this, women are normally used. So, like going back to like Brady, he couldn't have done what he done without Myra. Terry Kilbride, always said to me, I think she was worse than him because without her, he couldn't have got the children into his car. Let's go to Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. Now I know that
Horrible that is.
we know that Ian Huntley is the one that murdered those two little girls. But what he did was use Maxine Carr and the fact that she was a teaching assistant at their school. He said, "Come in, Miss Carr's in." So he used a female. It wasn't Maxine Carr. I mean, apparently she was in Barnsley. She wasn't even in the area. But he used her as a woman to go, "She's in the house. Come on in." And without that, they may not have gone in. People just trust females, I think. And I think that is maternal. And this is a message that Terry wanted to get across and I wanted to get across. And I'm guessing you want to get across as well, is like, don't you can't trust, especially as a child, you can't trust anybody. It's not strange men, it's strange people, isn't it?
Yep. It
Like,
applies to anyone. Like, no one's exempt, are they? Like, it could be anybody. And, you know, these days as well, you know, obviously we've got people who choose to change their genders and things, and rightly so, they're entitled to. But that can be something that can be quite scary as well, because you don't necessarily know, you know, people who are presenting themselves in a particular way. You might trust them, maybe somebody's a female, when actually they could be a male, for example, or you know, they change their look or their identity, and that's bound to have happened somewhere around the world, hasn't it? I'm pretty sure something like that, and people fall for it, you know. And there's been like social experiments as well on YouTube and stuff. I've seen other videos where there's been like a man with puppies and then like a woman with puppies, and then seeing how like children respond and interact, and it's really scary. Like, I don't know, like kids will go off of anyone. There's nobody's exempt from it. Like it could apply to anyone. So I don't know, you just gotta have your wits about you. I'm more afraid now as an adult than I was when I was a teenager. Because when you're young, you have no fear really, do you? Until something
yeah, yeah,
happens.
yeah,
But you risk assess things as you go on in life. And then when you have these experiences, you do kind of reflect and go, no, I'm not going to do that this time. Or, you know, you
yeah,
sort of
yeah.
safeguard yourself. But we don't when we're kids because, you know,
With the experience you had and with the near miss, because let's face it, like, it's pretty obvious that it sounds to me like, looking out of the curtains or the blinds as she was, someone or some peoples were coming to do whatever, to take you, to do unspeakable things, like you said, traffic, anything really. I don't think they were going to come round and play a game of, Monopoly. So with that experience, is that what has led you to do your channel?
Yep. Part of it is, yeah. Because I obviously, like, it's a near miss for me, and I was a young child, I was only like 7. But I actually covered a case, and I think the names were Holly and Selena Bigham, and they were from Scotland. And it was a woman who went missing with her daughter. And when I was doing that video, it made me realise as well, actually, like, there's probably a lot more cases out there like it. But it was partly that, because I want people to see how easy it is, first of all, for someone to go missing. And you're talking, like, I'm 36 now, so if I was 7, it was like 29 years ago. Oh my God, that's like 3 decades. That's depressing. Yeah,
Hey, it could
so,
have been more. It could have been more depressing. You still here
oh
to
yeah,
talk
yeah,
about it.
that's true. Find the positive.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, like, I kind of thought, like, it wasn't that I wanted to share my story in that instance. I just find it intriguing how someone can just go missing. There's no trace after a certain point. How do these things happen? And I am essentially, like, I've survived from an abduction, so I'm here and safe to tell my story. But there's hundreds of other people, thousands of people that potentially have been abducted, and they're not able to tell their story. So I'm that's what I want to do. I want to give that opportunity for families and friends of missing loved ones, to talk about that particular missing person. But the thing that I guess, like, strikes me sometimes as well is there's no law against somebody going missing. And, in some cases where people do go missing, it is a choice. And the
Mm.
hardest thing is for family members and friends and loved ones to accept that, because ultimately, if somebody wants to create a new life, they can. Like, there's
Yeah.
no law against it. So, yeah, it's kind of, like, it was partly from my story of being abducted, but also because I don't think there's enough coverage out there. I don't think there's enough media.
Go and check out your channel, which again is linked down in the description. And yeah, it's been good talking to you. Yeah, it's down there. Yeah. Yeah, like the video, share the video, all that jazz and mataz. Comment. I mean, comments are most important. I like the comments the most because it's interaction and stuff like that. If you want to subscribe, feel free. If you don't, then don't. Pick or choose. But yeah, thanks for sharing that story with us.
That's all right.
And what message would you give regards to what you went through? If you could just give one bit of advice or one message to people, what would it be for what you went through?
If you've experienced something like that and it's affected you for your life at whatever point it's happened to you, then please tell somebody, because keeping it to yourself is not going to do you any favors. And make sure that whoever you're telling is someone who's going to believe you. And obviously, it is a crime. And people have a choice if they wanted to take it forward and potentially prosecute if they've been lucky enough to survive, like I have. And that choice is yours ultimately. Like, you can seek help for it, or even counselling. There's always an option. So just don't keep it to yourself, and make sure you look after yourself. Is the main thing.
Educate your kids, obviously.
Oh,
I
one
have
more thing I need to add as well. Like, please don't walk with headphones on in the middle of the night. I see guys doing it, but like young females or like young women, and sometimes it can be quite late, and they're just walking like with headphones like this. and they're like,
Yeah.
listen to music, and it's like pitch black. And I think, how on earth are you alert to what is going on around you? Like, be safe. Even if you just do that, like one open, one closed, or just don't use them at all. Like, keep yourself safe, because you don't know who's lurking around or
Very good
what.
advice. Very good advice indeed. Well, yeah, thank you for coming on the channel. And yeah, please go and check out Missing Mysteries. You'll be doing more videos soon. I'll come on your channel soon, and I'll share whatever content you start to produce. Speak to you soon, Stacey, and for everybody else, peace out.